Yeah, I think we should start. It's 9:35. So yeah, we have the recording, so we'll be posting this on YouTube. So yeah, let's just get started. Uh, I'll start sharing my screen and feel free to you know throw in any questions that you guys might have. So it's a open discussion, so you don't have to wait until the end to ask questions. Just throw in your questions and we'll include that. And also you can unmute yourself if you ask questions yourself. And the question can be anything, right? It doesn't have to be about a particular topic we're discussing. If you are new to data science, uh, career tips, etc., you can ask about anything. Okay. So yeah, so let's get started. Welcome to the Data Science Show. So this is episode 6. Um, and today's speaker is a very special speaker, and you'll see why. Um, and his name is Yujian. So again, sorry if I'm pronouncing it wrong. Um, he's one of many brains, let's say, who has worked on AutoML products at Amazon. So today we'll be having a discussion about certain ML, AutoML products, and also career-wise, how did he get into Amazon, and then how did he end up building his own company, which he runs now, and some tips that he could share with us about Amazon and in general, right, career-wise. Um, and then we'll see how the discussion will direct towards data science and software development and so on. Right. So welcome, you, John. Thank you for coming on the show, and in a way contributing to the data science community. Where we run this podcast series to help people understand data science in many different sectors. So we try and invite people from many diverse background, so we could help let our users interact with uh, these people working in industry and ask questions and get career tips and so on. Right? So yeah, thank you for taking time out and coming on the show. Um, it's a pleasure to have you.
Thanks.
Um, and so a little bit about us. So me, along with two other colleagues of mine, we run the Data Science Show. We started this in December, and we have done about 5 episodes up until now, and we are also doing data science training program, which I'll talk about at the end. So feel free to stick around until the end. So just an introduction to ourselves. Let's start with Ashit. Do you want to introduce yourself? Or if you want me to do it, let me know, because I know you cannot talk much today. Yeah, okay, sure. So yeah, I should just stick today, so you won't be able to talk much. So Ashit, he's a civil engineer by background from IIT, and then he transitioned into data science as he was interested in data science, just like every one of us here, right? He did few internships before taking on a full-time role as a data scientist. Uh, and during his internship, he also wrote an AI patent. Um, and as of now, he's a data scientist at Permo Finance, and you can follow him on LinkedIn. So yeah, feel free to connect with him on LinkedIn. He does share a lot of things on LinkedIn. So if you guys want to follow and keep in touch. And me, so that's me, Mithul. My background is in theoretical physics, and then I decided to transition to data science. So I started out working in healthcare, and then I moved into backend physics, but more on the data science side. So basically, doing computer vision on Northern Lights. Um, and now I'm a data scientist at one of the large sports retailer, Decathlon. So I work because I'm based in Canada. I work for Decathlon Canada, and you can connect with me as well on LinkedIn. We have another colleague, Shashant. Do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah. Oh,
Yeah, so my background mostly is in statistics, mathematical statistics. I started my career with an e-commerce company where my role was mostly in analytics. Firstly was in analytics, then I decided to move to data science, where I started to like different took roles kind of I started with a hyper local business and then moved to retail, then moved to multimedia. So currently I'm working with Geo, and it's like working with the recommendation part of the multimedia group of Geo. Yeah,
Yep.
that's it.
Just to elaborate on that, just like you have Netflix where all these pictures, uh, like movies and shows, they have this the front end pictures that you see before you click on it to watch it. It's something heard, yeah, on the recommendation side, and you can connect with them on LinkedIn as well. And on to today's speaker. So, Yujian, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. I can go through the full introduction. So my name is Yujian. I started working in software in 2013. I won the American Computer Science League twice in a row, and I was recruited to work at IBM as an intern when I was in high school. So I worked there for about 3 years as an intern, and then I went to college and I studied machine learning, which is kind of how I got into the current background that or the current like jobs that I did out of college. While I was there, I published two papers. One of them was on neuroimaging and automatic segmentation for subcortical structures, and the other one was on data integrity using mobile sensors. So the data integrity paper was published to IEEE Big Data, and while I was presenting at the conference there, I met somebody who worked at Amazon, and we were talking, and he was like, "Hey, you should consider applying to Amazon." And so I did, and I got a job at Amazon, and I worked on their Auto ML team, where I made the company like $2.5 million in about like a year, less than like a few months. I decided from there that I was going to go and try to see, how fast can I like learn other different things, given that I'm like 20 something. So I'm like, all right, well, I've got time to kind of go and like mess around for a while and like learn different areas of the industry, and like be like, if I can create $2.5 million of value so quickly at a company, can I do it outside of that company? So I got into startups. I started my own company. My first company was just like totally failed. My second company was a bit better, and that's kind of like what I've been doing for the last 14 years. I've been doing, not 14 years, 14 months. I've been doing some consulting, tech consulting for different startups, and I've been running the Text API, and I've been blogging about, Python machine learning, data AI kind of stuff at Python Algos. So that's where we are now.
Thank you. That's a really interesting journey and tons of questions that I'm gonna ask you based on that.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's a beautiful journey, and you know, you have achieved so many things already up until
Oh,
now,
thanks.
right? Which feel like other like me myself, I haven't achieved that much, but yeah, that's cool to hear. So yeah, if you guys are interested in connecting with him, that's his LinkedIn. And yeah, he also shares a lot of things on LinkedIn, so do get connected with him.
I post a lot
And
of
he
memes.
writes, yeah, and like I've seen some of your, some of the things that you post, and yeah, and then I went on to read a few articles on your website too, and so yeah, I would recommend people to go on this website, and if you're interested in reading blogs on Python, good place. Uh, So yeah, let's start in today's session. So starting out with your papers, right? So that you said that's how you ended up at Amazon, right?
Mhm.
So did you have to, because Amazon, Facebook, Microsoft, right? They all big companies have a series of um, interview process, right? But I guess because you've been already working in the field, and because of the papers that you have published, did you have to go through the entire flow of the interview process, or was it really nice and quick?
I mean, I had to do all of the stages of the interview just like everybody else. I think everybody has to do all the stages of the interview. For me, there was 3 rounds. There was like one initial technical interview that was just like very basic, kind of like, um, you know, do you understand like the basics of computer science? Like, here's read some code and tell me if it's like buggy, and like tell me what's wrong with it. And like, like you can choose kind of like the different, I think they give you like a choice between some different code. I think I went with like Java or something at the time. It was like very easy to tell, there's like not, there's only so many things that can be wrong with your code. You're either like doing some naming wrong, or you're missing like semicolons, or some braces or something like that. So after that very basic tech screening, I did a behavioral screening, which basically they ask you some questions like, here's the situation. Let's say you're working on a project, and you realize the project is going to be like 2 weeks late. Like, what do you do? Do you, work on it by yourself? Do you talk to your coworkers? Do you talk to your manager? Do you blah, 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 blah? Like, there's a bunch of different options for it. And I passed that. And then after that, there was another tech screening that was like, here are some, like more advanced programs to write. And then I did that. And I remember on that one, they give you like they give you two problems. And the first one took me like 50 minutes. And it's like, it's not that I couldn't solve it, but I couldn't solve it in like the right manner. Cause like, how there's like optimizations for your like runtime. So I had like an O of n squared solution or something like that. And like, that would not work for like large test cases. So you need something like n log n or something like that. So I had that. And then the second one was way easier. I was like, what the hell? The second one took me like 8 minutes to do. And then I went back and finished the first one after that. And then I had my interview with what they have like as like their daily thing. But usually I think you go for a day and you do a bunch of interviews in a row, but I think they supplanted that with the interview they gave me before. So I only talked to one guy, and he was like the bar raiser. And that one was a really easy interview. He asked me like 2 questions about my code, and then that was it. And then the rest of the time was just me asking him about, what was your experience like at Amazon? What's your favorite thing? What's your least favorite thing? What made you go to Amazon? Blah, 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 blah. Like these kinds of things. And then the next day I got a job offer, and I was like, okay, cool. Looks like I'm going to be, well, I was applying to PhD at the same time, and I just didn't get into any of my PhD choices, but Amazon was honestly a pretty good option too.
So do you have to like prepare, because people spend so much time on preparing for interviews, right? So did you have to go and prepare a lot of things before you could tackle these questions and crack the interviews?
I think that the people who spend a lot of time preparing leak code for interviews are probably the same people that spend a lot of time cramming for exams in college and high school. I was just never one of those people. That's just not something I did or do. My kind of like approach is either I know it or I don't, and I'm just gonna walk into this thing, and if I'm fucked, I'm fucked. Like that's just like I feel like I've been practicing for so long. It's like I've just been practicing for so long that it was just like at this point, like I either know it or I don't, and like there's just like really not that much to do there.
Yeah, I had last year I had a recruiter reached out to me on Facebook, and that was more on the machine learning engineer role. And because I went through this whole interview process of 4 different roles, right? Now I'm a data scientist, but obviously they reached out to me for machine learning engineer, right? And then I was going through this whole interview process, and like, well, the interview process is so very similar to SDE roles, right? And I was like, well, nope, I cannot crack it. So I had to turn down the role. I told them, hey, you know what? I'm more suitable for data scientist. I'm not, machine learning engineer. So I'd be more interested in, that role and, interviews of that role, right? Because it's very different, right? Depending on what kind of positions you go for, right? I have another friend who transitioned from data science to SDE at Amazon. Obviously, he loved data science, but, it's Amazon, right? And they reach out to you, for a particular role, and you're like, okay, well, it's good money, it's Amazon, and why not take a chance, right? So yeah, he transitioned from data science to SCE, and he had to go through that whole process. He was already a computer science guy, so it's like, yeah, it was easy, but he had to put in a lot of work to crack the interviews and stuff, right? So it's interesting that even if you have remarkable papers published or whatsoever, you still have to go through the whole process regardless, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, leaving aside biases, right, in hiring, yeah, it was cool. And then and it was a brave decision, to leave Amazon after like people usually spend so many years at big companies because it's a one-time opportunity, right? And so and also a year. I guess you work for what, a year and a few months, right?
Yeah, I
And
mean, like, I don't really think like it's like a one-time opportunity kind of thing. Like when I left Amazon, like I like talked to my manager at my like skip level, and they were like, "Look, if you want to come back, you should just give us a call sometime." So
mhm,
like it's like it wasn't like one of those things where I was like, "Oh, it's like a one-time like opportunity." And like, it's I mean, Google's here, Facebook's here, like Apple's like nearby. Like I'm in Seattle, so there's like a lot of different like Meta's here. There's a lot of different big companies around here. And I also like I don't know, like I think like the way that you just kind of approach this is like if you think that you can get to that like level of engineering, if you can like pass those tests that they have for you, like they're really like, I think if you just think that you can get to that level, like you shouldn't worry about whether or not this is like one of those things you're like, oh, this is like the only chance I'm gonna get to do this. Like, not really. I think like you get in, you kind of like experience it. Like when I first got to Amazon, I was kind of like a little bit overwhelmed, and I was kind of like, wow, everybody here must be like super smart and blah blah blah. And then like I kind of started working there, and I was like, everybody here is just really just like a regular person.
yeah, no, what I meant by one-time opportunity, I meant like people, whenever people start working on new companies, right? They usually, it takes time to to settle down and to get to know what the company does. For example, like me working at Decathlon, right? We interact with so many different departments, and that there's so much to learn that a year, it's a very less time, right? To get an expert in your own field, and but also at the same time interact with every other person, every other department, right?
Oh yeah, that's
Um,
so true.
Obviously it's different at Amazon, right? Because Amazon's it's big, right, on a large scale, but companies like Decathlon, right? It's not comparable, right? The Amazon's too big, but that's what I meant. Like, it's a one-time opportunity in the sense that it takes time for you to settle down, and
For sure.
when you're just about to settle down in a year, and then you take a decision of exiting out of the company, right? So that's what I meant, right? But yeah, if you can crack Amazon, you can crack any jobs, or any big four companies, you can crack any other
Yeah.
interviews. That I agree with. Yeah, definitely. So yeah, based on that, how did you feel, leaving Amazon and then starting out your own company? Like, were you
Um,
excited or something nervous that I'm risking my life on this, or?
yeah, it was. I mean, it was both nervous and exciting. I didn't really like, my parents kind of had that like that response that you just said. You're like, oh, like you're kind of like risking your life on these kinds of things. But to me, I feel like that's like I don't know, but that's like an interesting approach to it, because in a sense, like nobody gets out of life alive, so you're always really risking your life in a sense. And I mean, am I going to be, if I feel like if I stayed at Amazon, I probably would have been a pretty good engineer. I probably would have gone to senior engineer in like the time that they expect you to get there, and that probably would have been a very like regular, very like regular software engineering kind of life. And I thought that was kind of boring, and I was like, I would rather try some different things, because I've been in software engineering for a long time. Like, for most people, like you got out of college, your first job, you just say like, oh, this is like my first job. But like I had like the experience of being a software engineer at IBM for like 3 different years before that. Like, although it was part time, and it was like like or it was like a full time during the summer, but it was like an internship kind of thing. Like I had that experience already, and I was kind of like, this is pretty boring. Large tech companies really like they are kind of boring. You know, even though you do get to work on some cool things, like it's like not a very like exciting job. And um, I wanted to kind of just like, you know, I was like, well, let me kind of like learn about what other kind of jobs you can do, right? It's like I just did in one field the whole time. It's just software engineering. When I interned, like I was interning as like a software engineer, and like and when I went to intern at a different company in college, and when I did research, like it was working as a researcher, and working as a researcher was actually pretty fun too. But I just kind of wanted to see like what else is out there. So
Yeah, no, that's true, right? Like people go work for. In addition to that, I feel people also, see and learn that, hey, there's something that's missing, which consumers care about, and if this company is not doing it, if none of the other companies are doing it, if I can do this at X and X company, help resolve that, right? So yeah, that's one thing I like, right? Working in industry, you get to see many such things. What are the issues that consumers are facing, and what are the things that you can do, and you can use your expertise, right, to help uh, make something out of it, right? Yeah, that's really cool. So let's start with the Amazon journey then. So you got to Amazon, right, and then you started working on this AutoML product. Right? So could you tell us a bit about what is AutoML product, and what are the things you were sort of contributing to?
sure.
Mhm.
So I got put on this like small team. It was like a new team. They're on retail side. And basically they were like, we're going to build this platform to allow continuous classification of different, sorry, I'm burping, of different like what are they called? ASINs, images and text for different objects on Amazon that you can sell. So the first project I did was I forget what the exact first project I did was, but I was basically only working on it for like 2 or 3 months before they like scrapped it. And then I helped do another project, and then after that they were like, here's like the whole like I was on this very small team, by the way. We had like 3 people when I joined. We had like 5 people when I left. But basically, but I was like, we worked on like cross team projects. So we like had projects where they do this thing, they call it dotted line, basically, where you have people who report to you, but they don't really report to you. And those people are actually like, dotted line management is actually quite difficult because you have no real authority over these people, but you have to get them to kind of like work on the project that you want them to work on. But we had like a couple different projects that were kind of that style, and they were basically like, look, we got this big project. You've been here for like a few months. Like it was like less than 6 months at the time. They were like, let's see if you can kind of like do this whole pipeline. When usually I think most junior developers do like some of the design and mostly just implementation. Usually if you're a junior dev, you do design with like a senior dev, I think. But they just didn't have the resources. So I basically like, they were like, here, do the design and then like come back to us. And I was like, what the hell is this? But it worked. I mean, it worked out well. My first project, I did the design and then did the architectural stuff, the implementation. And really at the time, I only like half understood what I was looking at. But it got approved and everything, and then we put it into production, and the design worked out, and it was actually like good enough that we were able to very quickly onboard new models. We were able to 10 times our like yearly target for December by May. And I think part of that was because I wrote a lot of documentation for what I made. And that's like very important. You should always document things. And like, I always talk about this on my like LinkedIn and my Medium articles. And like, honestly, it's such a big thing. But if you go to big companies, you'll notice that like part of the culture is that the at least at Amazon, part of the culture is the documentation is pretty shitty. but sometimes it's really good. And, you know, when you get to use those products, you're always like very happy. You're like, wow, somebody actually took the time to tell me how to use this. Sometimes you're like, okay, who wrote this? And then you have to go ping that person. And sometimes that person has left that team, or they've left the company, or, you know, it's been like 4 years and they don't like remember it anymore. And you're just like, oh, wow. It's a pain. But yeah, so that was my first project, was basically designing the onboarding system. And then my second project was designing how do you reuse data. So in AutoML, the idea is that you can put a machine learning model online and you don't have to worry about it for as long as it's alive. They call it like life cycle maintenance. And so the life cycle machine learning model works like this, right? You get the data. So they had some sort of training system that was like a pretty like cool training system. They called it like, it was like some magic training system. Basically, it was active learning, which we call it active learning now. And so you put it, you train the model, and then you get the metrics for the model, the accuracy, the precision, the recall, the F1 score, all that stuff. I'm sure if you guys are in data science, these are things that all are familiar. And so you get all those things, you put the model online, you run inference on the model, and then you need to do drift detection on the model. So you need to observe what's going on. You need to make sure that the model doesn't. So if your model starts out at 98%, it's going to degrade over time as you see new data, as it runs on new data. So, you know, when your model gets to, let's say, 92%, you probably want to retrain it. And then, so what I did was I created this pipeline that basically took new and old training data and allowed it to be used for both training and retraining. And that was kind of like my second project. And that was like something that immediately like generated like $1 million plus in value, just because we could reuse so much data. What was this question?
In terms of the model, yeah, so this is a question from Shashank, so I'll take that. And also think about the model, right? So you did this whole pipeline for a single model, right? But
no,
because it's an auto,
we
so
built the
you build a platform, so that can be basically used for as many models as you like.
Yeah, so the onboarding process, the onboarding system was basically like this. You come in, you tell us what organization you're from, you tell us what team you're from, you tell us what model you have, where your model is located, and then we control access to the model based on the team and the organization, and we also do the lifecycle maintenance for the model.
So is it you guys who would be, doing all that training process and everything, or is it that they, me, let's say I'm working in another department, I would be doing the training and everything, right? I have the trained model and then I pass it on to you guys. Is that how it works?
That depended entirely on the organization that we were working with. So some organizations, so we didn't do any of the training actively, but we didn't always, like, some people had trained models. Some people said we wanted to build a model. And so we had a specific like training kind of like platform that you could train on. But also if you just had a trained model, we could take it and automate kind of like the drift detection and retraining part. So with the training part, there's always a little bit of human in the loop because it was like an active learning kind of thing. So.
Yeah, so we have a question from Shashank.
Yeah, so when I think of
let me go ahead, Rashid.
Yeah, so when I think of AutoML, so I usually think of like deciding the architecture of a neural network automatically, right? So is that actually a part of AutoML, or is what you worked on actually AutoML?
You think of designing a neural network architecture?
Yeah, so basically, instead of manually trying different architectures, you just create an algorithm which makes the perfect neural network for you.
No, we did like the life cycle maintenance. I think it sounds like what you're talking about is like hyperparameter tuning, unless you're like talking about also like, well, actually, I guess hyperparameter tuning does include like somewhat neural network like architecture. That includes like how many nodes that you want to have in your like hidden layers, but like it doesn't include things like, okay, how many CNNs do we want, or how many convolutions do we want in this like network?
Yeah.
So
so there is sorry, go ahead.
Continue.
So with the auto deep learning thing that Akshay just mentioned, right? So there's actually a product that's available on the market which would create an architecture for you,
That's
right?
cool.
Now, obviously, it won't be as perfect, but yeah, it's debatable on how good it is. But back when I used to work in computer vision, so I think
Yeah.
it's called auto DL or something like that. So basically, you pass in your input data, and then it automatically creates an architecture for you. And again, I'm not sure on how it decides whether before, because it's a prior decision, right? Before even getting to inference part, right? So I'm
Mhm.
not sure how it decides on which architecture works best for your data, because obviously deep learning it takes a lot of time to train, and the architecture gets into very depth, right? So that's where the auto DL. So I think the auto ML part mostly focuses on the ML algorithms, keeping aside all the computer vision and
Hmm.
deep learning algorithms, right?
You could
And
probably
the
add
intuition that
that
I
into AutoML
yeah,
stuff. Like you could
sorry.
probably add like the neural network design into like an AutoML lifecycle if you wanted to.
Okay, that's cool. Yeah, the way that I see the autonomous products now in the market is, so you have your input data, right? You pass in to this auto ML, and it would run basically, all the algorithms that exist in that product or in their package, right? They would run all the different ML algorithms on your data, and then at the end of the day, it gives you a best model as output. So then, people would go out and they were like, okay, you know what, this is the best one that worked out of all, let's say 10, 12 different algorithms applied on the data, right? So that's how I see the AutoML product these days in the market. I'm not sure if that differs from the AutoML product that you built on
I think that's slightly different than what we built. I think we built something that was specifically for like maintaining life cycles for models.
Amazon. Okay,
Right, right.
cool.
Like you could train models, but you know.
I was also curious on like how exactly were those like big models like GPT-3 or any other like BERT maybe. So how those architectures were like figured out, right? So did they manually try it or did they have some algorithm for it?
Um,
If
I
it's something you worked on, I don't know if
Oh
you
no,
worked on it.
we didn't really work
Uh,
on like the LLM stuff.
Yeah.
That's actually like quite a bit
Yeah.
newer than what I've been
yeah.
working on, or than what I've worked on before. I do imagine they would have AutoML for the LLMs. I think they are like pretty much constantly fine tuning them, but haven't worked on it personally, so I'm not totally sure.
Hmm.
Yeah. Shashan, do you want to ask a question? Sorry to keep you waiting.
No. No. So, I was like, so what is the exactly steps which we follow? Like, let's say I am a guy, I want to use the AutoML platform.
Sure.
I have data, but I have no idea about the what machine learning is and what all these things are. Like, I know about there are two types of machine learning algorithm. Let's say one is classification and one is regression. uh, I know this problem uses regression, so I have to give you the data. Correct me if I'm wrong. I have to give you data, and you will deploy all these things. You will train the model and deploy the model, and all these things. You will take care of it, or is it like I have to train the model? I have to give you the model file, whatever the weights will be, and then it will be deployed on your platform.
Yeah, so that depended. I mean, like both of those are like were like possible. That was like something that depended on the team that we were working with because we
Hmm.
wanted to make it so that teams who didn't already have an ML product could come and access and create their own ML stuff. But we also wanted it to be available to teams that were already running like machine learning models.
Hmm.
That's a business decision. So this is like so both of those were kind of like a possibility. There's no I mean, like, I don't want to say there's no technology that exists that does this right now, but usually, and as far as I know, most AutoML stuff still has like human in the loop kind of thing. So you have to have like somebody kind of do some do some work with the AutoML. So maybe like you're paying when it's like retraining, and you have to like ensure that like So for example, what we had that was like human in the loop was like, okay, here it's trained, and then you train it on like a few images, and then it extrapolates, and then it comes back to you and says, okay, like based on the images that you gave us, here are our labels for these images. How correct is this? And so it was able to kind of like keep up its to keep track of its whatchamacallit, accuracy, metrics basically over time as it was training. So there is some human in the loop interaction to it, but that's not necessarily so it wasn't entirely automated basically.
Okay, cool.
So,
And yeah, the
yeah,
second
go ahead,
question.
Sean. Yeah.
Sorry, continue, please.
No, go ahead. I don't know if we
So
have
yeah,
connection properly.
yeah. So the second question is like, so if there is like the basic use case of the auto ML will be like someone who don't know a lot of data science and want to create a model, but let's say I am a data analyst. I don't know much about the data science platforms, but don't know much about the deep how to code and all this. I started using AutoML. There's a time where two things come. There's a model accuracy and interpretability. Okay, so how these things can be handled using AutoML? Like let's say uh, I want to my model to be more interpretable compared to more accurate. Let's say business team asks me like which factors are affecting the model a lot. So how these things can be handled by AutoML platforms? Like, is there any way or
what do you mean there should be a trade-off between model interpretability and model accuracy?
So let me rephrase it. Actually, what Shashan's asking. So I think I understand his question. So what he's saying, like so this AutoML product, right? So it's designed. So is it designed in a way that someone who doesn't know coding, right, uh, can use it? But also at the end of the day, whatever. So I don't know any coding, right? But I don't want to. I want to do some ML on the product that I have, right? So I take this AutoML product, right? I give the input data, which I have, right? At the end of the day, this AutoML would build out the data, would build out models for me, and so on and so forth, right? And then at the end, it would give me inference, right? So it gives me the key metrics, which is useful for my business, right? So how do you make sure that the results that I'm getting at the end of the day uh, kind of makes sense to me, and also is there a way where I could tweak something in between this whole process so that I could improve the end results? Is that correct, Sean? Does that?
yeah, it is.
Okay.
I don't know what you mean by like the end results like should make sense to you. Like as long as like you don't need to know coding to like the product that we created, like you don't need to know coding to do it. Basically what you do is you come in with a data set, and as long as you know your data set, the model can be created for you, it can be trained for you. You just come in and you have to do a little bit of like labeling. So they had this like system where you could extrapolate from a few number of images. So one of the nice things about the system that they had created was so I didn't create this training part. This is not something that I created, but someone else, on my team created something where basically instead of having to train your model on say 3,000 images, you could train it on like 10 at a time, and it would consistently improve over time. So that's kind of the place where you can, adjust how your model does, and that's probably what affects most of your outcome. There aren't any. Like I don't know like what you mean by like how can you create some like a outcome that makes sense to you, because there's really, I mean, as long as the model is classifying things correctly, like it's making sense. Now, of course, there's no such thing as 100% accuracy in machine learning. So there are some times where it's going to classify things incorrectly. And, you can be like, oh, here's what it's doing incorrectly. Here are the classes that we need to go retrain probably.
Got it. Yeah.
Not a lot. Like you can't be like, it's incorrectly. And like, here's why, like these weights are wrong. Like that's it's not something that is really classically done. It might be able to be done now, but it's not something that I remember seeing.
Got it. Yeah. So you'd lose basically To answer that question, basically you use the explanation part in this whole process, right? Because at the end of the day, for data scientists, they would like to have a meaningful results outcome, which can be, explained. But yeah, at least it helps with,
Well,
if you
okay,
have
wait.
incorrect
I'm
results.
actually I'm actually kind of curious now. What do you mean? Like you guys can explain machine learning models? Like if I give you like a
So
CNN, you can tell me like which, like, oh, okay. I mean, like you can see like, okay, so you want to know if you can extrapolate, like, so if you want to know if you can extract like the layers of the CNN and be like, this is what this layer.
yeah, so to take your example, right? So let's say it gives me an incorrect result, right? Incorrect outcome for one of the predictions, let's say, right?
Yes, yes.
So to extrapolate back to why it did that, and also so that I can, so in this whole process, so that I can tweak, let's say, in between some hyperparameters that like manually myself, so that this result can be improved, right? And the second one, when I say about explanation, is so there are some machine learning algorithms which you know at the end of the day, you can do some explanation as to why you got that result, right? And there are some algorithms which are like black box, right? Like for example, deep learning models, right? So you lose that interpretation part at the end of the day, right? Whereas linear regression and such kind of models, because they are really simple models, the results that you get, you can actually explain it, right?
Oh, okay. Everything we're
So
looking
there,
at deep learning models. When I say machine learning models, I mean deep neural networks. I don't like linear regression, statistic regression is like, okay, yes, these are machine learning, I understand, but this is not, when I say machine learning models, I'm specifically talking about deep neural networks. Sorry.
Okay, cool.
Got it. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Got it. Okay, interesting. Any other questions you guys have? Or
Which, by the way, you can
other-
actually explain different layers of deep neural networks, and there is a way to do that. You can, so for example, if you have a CNN, you can actually pull out the layers of the CNN internally and see what it is recognizing on each convolutional layer.
Yeah, so yeah, with the deep learning, right? Because I think like people care more about the end result. Like for example, I used to work in healthcare, and in healthcare, whatever results, the end results that we got, and because healthcare, if we are affecting many lives, right? You don't want to, based on whatever you're designing, you don't want to, impact human lives, right? So always there, people don't use fancy models, like fancy like deep learning models and so on and so forth, because they can, you can see what's going on, in between the process, from going from one layer to another to so on and so forth, right? But the end result, right, that's what matters at the end of the day too, right? And this end results, if you cannot explain it, then in healthcare they're like, okay, we're not going to use it, right? Because we don't know how well it is. Yeah, we have the metrics that tell us, but why the algorithm decided to give us this result, we cannot explain it, right? Whereas using simple models like linear regression, right, you have this equation which is for hundreds of years, and you don't lose that explanation part, right? So in certain areas, like that's where the distinction between which algorithms to use and which not to use, that kind of matters, right? And these days, there are tools out there which can be used for the explanation part, right? Now people have come up with so many different tools which can be implemented in your deployment process, where you can do some explanation. You have 20 different features, you can actually see which of the features contributed to your predictions. And if a feature, let's say, had values going from 0 to 100, right? So you can pinpoint which values contributed to higher prediction or lower prediction, so on and so forth. Yeah, someone mentioned shape, SAP and Lime. Yeah, that's true, right? So I'm talking about one of some of these tools, right? So easier for that's where that's why in healthcare, like I said, right, people don't use fancy models, and if they want to use it, they are really careful on that, right?
Yeah, even in
We
finance,
do have it.
lending also, so in India, the RBI has really strict regulations about what kind of models can you use. They have to be like really transparent and explainable.
We do have a question, so let's take a question from the chat. So we have a question from Akash. I would like to ask you, what are your thoughts about visual intent language? Like I'm coming up with a problem or a project where one can provide intent Example for any data sets like Titanic data set, show me age-wise survival rate, and model will understand hidden semantic, where lower level tech, example, how to display, make a row for each age pins, show a bar chart where lenses based on survival count, etc., etc. So I'm not sure exactly what you're trying to ask here.
Do you
Do you
like me
wanna?
to ask it in person? Like I try to comment it out in as possible explanation way, but do you want me to explain it? Like,
Yes, please. Yeah, that'd be great.
so currently I'm looking forward to work on one of the project. Like I have not decided I should work on it or not. I was thinking about it. I'm looking for a project in which I can create a chat bot or a chat like for a Slack. Like Slack is there. I want to integrate with Slack, and where my module NLP module will interact with Slack, and Slack as a user over Slack, I will provide that show me, for example, show me the cheap wines. Okay. And what my model will try to understand is the hidden semantics or the hidden intent, what I was looking forward to it. For example, the hidden intent over here would be make a row of each wines with respect to price and short those data with respect to the price. So that's what I am looking forward to. So what are your thoughts? Like, how would you approach to this problem, or what you are looking forward to this kind of problem?
Well,
Is this
that's
a
a
homework
that's a
question?
sorry.
And
Is this
at
a
the end,
homework
the
question?
output would be the graph
No.
provided by the model on Slack. Like it can be integrated, that part would be integrated, but how the model will work on, like methodology of the model.
Okay. Okay. So you're saying something, Yujian? What was your?
I was asking if this is like a homework question.
No, no, not a homework question.
uh, so
This
I
was
understand
one
like
of the
what he's
research paper I
asking.
was reading. Like Tableau is
Uh,
working on this, so I thought why
yeah.
I should try on this.
So
It sounds like, I mean, I don't know what visual intent language is, but it sounded to me like what you want to do is like figure out what it sounded like what you wanted to do was get some like topic modeling on. I'm going to take your Slack example, like topic modeling on like messages in Slack, which is like pretty simple. You can like apply like an existing topic model, like BERT topic or something like that. I've written like a paper on that. Not a paper, sorry. I've written like a blog article on that. I can link that if that's helpful. But once you get something like that, then it's not really like what you want out of like the bins and like the visualization stuff is not something that I would be like, yeah, this is like traditional machine learning stuff. Like that's like data visualization. So you probably want to use, I'm just going to assume you're using Python. You probably want to use like matplotlib and just like plot the examples. If you're using R, then you want to use like ggplot or whatever, ggplot2, I think. And you just want to plot the examples. It sounds like you want to plot some like topics. So like, let's take your Slack example. What I would do is like get a list of like the topics, like run it through a topic detection model, and then that would automatically tell you like how many, or it would give you which messages correspond to which topics, and then you can just plot that like an XY plot, like a general bar plot.
I think
Okay.
ChatGPT can already do this, right? If
Yeah,
you want to
probably.
I was
try.
gonna say that. Yeah.
Yeah.
You could also just
Yeah.
ask ChatGPT. This is always like the answer for like current like machine learning things. You can just ask ChatGPT because it knows.
So what ChatGPT is doing is giving me the language intent, but what I am looking forward to is to understanding the data, understanding the headers, understanding the semantics or the schema of the data, and based on that, give the best visualization which can be provided for the data. Like when you do EDA, you look forward for other different kind of graphs. So what could be the best possible graph for this kind of data or this kind of for this particular schema? So that's what I am looking forward.
What's the best kind of graph?
Yes, for that particular schema, like multivariate data have different kind of plots. Should we look into it? to get the insights, better insights, whereas univariate data have different plots to look into.
So actually,
Um,
I have tried to solve this at work. Uh, so what we did was we just use a decision tree. It will
Okay.
create all the multivariate segments for you, and you can look at which segment is the most interesting one. Uh, so based on some metric, you can define your own metric for it, and you can create the graph for that.
Okay.
yeah, I'm gonna go with Aish's answer on this. I don't really do a lot of data visualization.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, hopefully that answers your question. So it's something similar to, I think, what Bing does, right? With their integrated ChatGPT now, like, in Excel. So on the side window, you can ask any questions you'd like, and then it would produce the outcome, the results, and everything for you, right, on the side. So I think it's something similar that you're trying to do. I feel, and based on what I understood so far, right? And I feel like this is a whole new, like, kind of like system that you have to build, and depending on what kind of input data that you're providing, and if it has a univariate variables, multivariate variables, and so on and so forth. I feel like in Python you will have to do a lot of loops and stuff, so that at the end of the day, if it's, let's say, univariate, then you're producing plots for univariate stuff, right? If else, if it's multivariant and so on and so forth, and then it directs to that part of the code, and then it outputs the multivariate results, and then categorical distribution and so on and so forth, right? So I feel like that's more on the coding side, which you have to do in Python, and then integrate it with, I guess, Slack with their API, and maybe somehow build a system that would do this whole thing for you. Yeah.
That answers it. I still would like to look at your blog, which you have written. Please share me that link.
Yeah, sure, I can do that.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
I can send you. Oh, you mean the article that he mentioned, or
That Mr. Tang mentioned.
I think the article he's talking about. Oh,
Yes.
there you go. He
Yeah, I
sent
just
you.
sent it. Yeah,
Yeah.
this is one that I wrote for B.
Stick around. It's probably going to be another 10 minutes.
Yeah.
Just talk about what is the training that we are providing, and so on and so forth.
Okay.
Yeah, if you're not sticking around, thank you very much again for your time. And yeah, it was amazing talking to you, and learned a lot from you.
Yeah, great
Thank you. I
stuff. Yeah,
appreciate it.
yeah.
Have a nice
Thank
day.
All
you.
right, take care.
Bye.
Yeah. Bye. Okay, so yeah, let me. So I guess you started recording, Ashit. Okay. Hopefully Shushan has the link because I've sent it to everyone. So yeah, this is bad. Okay. So let's start from what is it that we are offering, right? So we started offering this data science project course where basically we are providing mentorship, um, and you'd be able to build an end-to-end data science project. Uh, so there are a lot of boot camps right out there, and it teaches people the basic foundations that's needed, Python, machine learning, deep learning, etc. Right? But one thing that still lags, and the reason why people are still struggling to get a job is you learn all of these things, but then how do you put together the pieces and you build an end-to-end product, right? Um, so it's a similar thing to Akash, what you were mentioning earlier about designing this whole system, right? So this is a similar thing, right? So you build an entire pipeline where if we can imagine you're working for a company where you would have company would be collecting a data on their customers and so on and so forth, right? So how do you go from that data collection to the deployment of the product at the end of the day, right? So that it's beneficial to the company, and also you as a data scientist, you're building this entire system, right? So that's what we are trying to teach, right? And that's what I feel people really need in order to distinguish themselves in the market, other than just boot camps, right? So in a single project, what we are focusing on is basically, people would be using Python or R, depending on whatever they would like to use. But I mean, I would say Python is the best choice. Then you would be using, those cloud services, AWS or GCP. GitHub, most valuable skill to have, right? If you want to go and work for big companies, GitHub is must to have. Some CI/CD tools, like for automation, right? Today's topic was AutoML, right? And this is where the CI/CD part and all comes in, right? So this thing here, again, it's a new thing, with data scientists are getting hang on it, and very valuable. So we're basically integrating this into our project. And this one here, that's like, I would say, top priority, right? How do you follow software engineering principles and bring it to data science, right? And again, this is most valuable because, in today's talk, right, we learned about maintenance, monitoring, and so on and so forth, right? And, this helps you with all of that process, like, how you as a data scientist can do that for your own company, for your own organization, right? How do you catch bugs, right? Coding, there's always bugs, right? There are always things break into production, right? So how do you make sure that you catch all of those bugs, right? Before you deploy things into production, right? So how would you do that, right? So that's something that you would learn. So, you start with the planning, you use some analysis, you design the system that you wish to implement, right? And then, you do some testing and integration so that you can catch, at most all the bugs that you could. And then when things go into production, how do you, maintain it, right? The maintenance is the main thing. It's not like you build a machine learning model, then you put it into production, you're done. That's not it, right? You also have to make sure that every time the new data comes in, your model is working fine, it's giving you the expected results, and it's optimized so it runs quick, and so on and so forth, right? So that's what we are helping with. So we have basically built this entire pipeline from start to an end, right? And this is what we are now teaching to our students. So
You can show this
think
on
of this.
GitHub.
Yeah, let me show this. Do I have it somewhere there? Yeah. So, so think of this as an internship where, you would be going and working at a company where you'd be working under a senior data scientist and building this entire project, right? And, the kind of the whole structure is similar to an internship structure, right? The whole environment. A data scientist will be giving you a task which you're expected to do. If you're stuck, or if you need direction and so on and so forth, the data scientist will be guiding you along the way. But at the end of the day, you are the one who's building this entire system, right? The pipeline is there, right? The pipeline is already there. The only thing is for you to put together the entire pipeline so that it could work, right? So you start with some raw data, right? And this is where the data engineering aspect comes in. We're not teaching, it's not a course on data engineering, so we're not teaching every other tool that a data engineer would use, but the most valuable one, which is the ETL process called extract, transform, load, that's what we are teaching, right? So how do you do that in Python, right? So, you start with raw data, then you have data, you store that data somewhere on your database, right? And then you do some ETL processes, and then you store that data back on some database. So imagine, if you're using AWS, your company is using AWS Redshift, right? So maybe a data warehouse, so this is where you're storing the process data, right? And now you as a data scientist, right? Imagine someone from let's say you're working for a retailer, and a supply team or a marketing team comes to you with a specific problem statement, and they're like, if you could help us, do them some analysis and provide insights, right? Now you as a data scientist, you have lots of data in your data warehouse, right? How do you, like, you could have transactional data, you could have customers' data, they could have the stock data, and so on and so forth. So how you as a data scientist would go to your database and then extract these different the attributes, features that's needed to provide insights. How do you combine them together from many different tables, right? So this is, you have a data model, right? You have 10, 12, 15 different tables, let's say, right? How do you make sure that you're only extracting valuable information from your database, right? Because at the end of the day, you don't want to write a query which would take forever to run, right? So you want to optimize your query. And then that data then gets stored somewhere on, let's say, S3, right? And you would like to store this data somewhere because you want to do data versioning, right? So just like you would have a version system like GitHub, for instance, you can have a timeline for your code. You could have a timeline for your data too. Right? So each week, imagine a new data comes in, then something happened this week and you don't have a data, right? At least you have last week data to fall back to, right? So that's why you would store that data somewhere, and then this is where the fun part that a lot of newcomers gets stuck on, right? They only do this part. They don't think about all of these processes, right? Which is machine learning, data analysis, and so on and so forth, right? So that's what this whole thing is right now. Once you have the model, then what do you do, right? Because when you work for an organization or even for yourself, right? If you're building something, at the end of the day, you have to think about the business use case, right? And if it's not valuable to your business, to your organization, then that's not worth it, right? So you want to build something that's valuable and that would create a value for your company, right? So the end result needs to go somewhere. So someone, a consumer, or your customer supply team or marketing team can then interact with it, and then they can make their decisions based on the insights you provide, right? So then this here would be the deployment process, right? So you can deploy it to a dashboard, you can create a Flask app. If it's a computer vision model, then you deploy it on Kubernetes and so on and so forth, right? And the other thing is, imagine now, you build this entire system, right? Now next week you get a new data, right? So when you get a new data next week, are you going to run this entire process manually, right? Do you have to go and run the individual scripts? Let's imagine 10 different scripts. Do you have to go run them individually? No, you don't want to do that, right? It's very time consuming. So what do? Well, you try and automate, right? So you try and automate the whole process. So with a one click, you go from here to here within seconds, right? Or within minutes. So that's where CI/CD comes in, right? Tools like we mentioned here, right? This aspect here. So that's where that part comes in, right? And the other most valuable thing is people stick to Jupyter notebooks. Yeah. Now, if you're a beginner, it's good, but over time you need to leave that Jupyter space environment, and you have to think about production. Can you put Jupyter notebooks into production? Well, you could. I don't know on that side, but is it better to do everything in a single Jupyter? Can you build this entire pipeline in a single Jupyter notebook? Imagine how messy you would get, right? So you have to leave that Jupyter notebook environment, go to writing scripts in Python, right? Go towards IDEs like VS Code, PyCharm, etc., and learn to write scripts, right? Python scripts, and which can work with, you're not building one single script, you're building lots of different types of scripts for individual tasks. And then how do you put together all of those things, right? And how can you write code, right? Documentation was the key that, Yujian mentioned. Without documentation, it's a nightmare. So how do you make sure that, A, you have a really good documentation, and B, the code that you write, it's readable to others and even for yourself if you were to come back to it after a few months, right? and that's what makes a better data scientist, a better programmer, right? The kind of code you write and the way you structure your entire project and so on and so forth, right? So that's a valuable thing to learn, and that's what we teach, right? uh, and um, and then it's also a one-on-one session we are doing, right? So we take limited students so that we don't take people in groups uh, of 10, 15, 20, because it's same as doing what do you call a tuition classes, if you like, right? So it's a similar kind of scenario where you're teaching 10 to 15 people, and you cannot focus on individuals and what they are doing and so on and so forth, right? So we decided, okay, we're going to work on less number of people so that we can really focus on them, and then they get what they're supposed to get, right? So when they leave this you know course, they will feel like they have learned a lot than they knew before, and something that's really valuable, and now they can go out and they can work on their own projects, and based on this foundation that they have built, this thing can work with any kind of structured data. So you can take any data, all you have to do is tweak Python scripts a little bit, and this entire foundation works with any kind of data set, right? So then they'll go on and build more projects and that, so on and so forth, right? And it's something you can showcase for your jobs, right? So we're not guaranteeing jobs, but what we are guaranteeing is skills. You will upskill yourself, uh, and you would leave in confidence at the end of the day, right? You'll be confident that you can do anything, uh, including you will be confident that you can crack interviews and you can answer questions that you weren't able to answer before, right? So so we changed our timeline and also the pricing from before. Like, we initially, it was 1.5 months, but we have students and we noticed that it's sometimes not easy to wrap up things within 1.5 months, because either they are slow or they don't know things and so on and so forth, right? And it's better to take it easy. So we decided, okay, we're gonna keep the timeline of 2 months. So 2 months is the maximum cap that you'd have to finish your project within. Now, you know, at most it would take a month and a half, right? We had students who didn't know anything and they were able to finish it in a month and a half. So, it's doable. So the cap is 2 months, and it depends on you how, if you like to waste time and so on and so forth, right? That's on you. If you cannot finish within 2 months, that's on you, right? But because we have tested it, we know it's doable within 2 months, and also because we are guiding you along the way, right? We are there to guide you and to build the entire project, right? And the price has hence gone up. Like, initially we were doing at $150, so about 9,000 rupees, I think, and now we've increased it to 12 because obviously we had to increase the timeline, and now we'll be doing more guidance than before. The only requirement that we have is you should know basic Python, right? That's the only requirement. And when I say basic Python, I mean, you should be able to know how to define variables, what are different data types in Python. You can write if else loop, while loop, so on. That's it. Simple basic stuff, right? List comprehension, what's a Boolean, what's a integer, what's a float, etc., right? So really, really basic. And even functions, if you don't know functions, that's okay. How to define functions in Python. If you know it, that's good. You don't need to know object-oriented programming and advanced Python and so on and so forth. No. That's everything that you would learn, right? So if you know these basic things, right, if it's a checkbox on your end, then you're good, right? Because yeah, it's teaching Python is an entirely separate course, right? And it's not worth it. It's a lot of time, right? So and plus everyone's teaching Python. There's so many boot camps to teach you Python. So we want to be different, right? We don't want to be the same as other people. And in terms of pricing, yeah, we are, I don't think you would be able to find boot camps who are, this cheap, I would say. There are boot camps who are charging, 50,000, 1 lakh rupees, 2 lakh rupees, and so on and so forth. Uh, Even then, people are struggling with jobs, right? So we decided we're gonna keep the price low, just so that we can support ourselves, because we are a team and we are trying to build a strong team to help the community. But also we are using some of these tools, right? Some of these tools, uh, then we would have to pay from our own pocket, right? Um, After subscription is over, right? Once the free tire expires, then it's on us. And the most important thing is, we have families and friends, and but we are keeping aside a lot of time in building the project. Like this project here took us a month to build from scratch, right? So, so it's fair for us if you were to charge a small amount, but also we are contributing to the community more than I feel anyone else with a given amount. And we do have a refund policy. If you're not happy within the first 2 weeks, as to you're not learning anything and you don't see value of it, we will refund you 75% of the price that we are charging. Uh, and after 2 weeks, there won't be any refund. And if you don't finish the project in the given time, that's really on you. We cannot help it. But because we are there to guide you, we know you can finish it. But if you waste your time and you don't finish the task on time and so on and so forth, that's really on you. We cannot help you with that. So again, like limited students, right? We at the time, at, at an instant, we're taking about 2 to 3 students in collaboration, and then build this entire project and so on and so forth. So if anyone's interested, feel free to fill out the form. And then reach out to us on LinkedIn if you'd like to learn more about it. We'll be happy to meet you on one-on-one and figure out your interest. Now the data set here is customizable, so you can bring in your own data set, or you can tell us what your interest is, and we'll be able to try and find the data set for you. But at the end of the day, whatever you're interested in, you're going to be doing that, right? So it's not a fixed data set that we have decided we're going to be using. It's on you. What is the problem that you wish to work on, right? So you used to work on marketing, retail, and so on and so forth. If it's doable, and if it, like for example, certain areas we are not an experts because we don't work in that field, then we'll be like, okay, you know what? It'll be difficult to do this entire project because we ourselves are not from that field. Then we'll be like, okay, you'll have to stick to another data set, right? So again, so feel free to think about data sets, and if you want to join, feel free to connect with us. So on that end,
Mithil, can
yeah,
you paste the form link in the chat?
yeah, sure, we'll paste the form link in the chat. And do reach out for the pricing. The pricing also differs based on if you're in India, if you're abroad, and so on and so forth. Obviously, because of the economic conditions and so on and so forth, right? So um, yeah, and then we'll get to the Q&A. But just the update on what's next to come. We'll be having a few more podcasts coming up. There's a company called Blinks AI who will be joining us. We also have some people from uh, Swiggy who would be here, and we are working with a lot of other guests, trying to bring them on our podcast. So stay tuned and follow up on LinkedIn. We also do a tutorial sessions. We'll be starting a tutorial sessions. So machine learning tutorial session from scratch, like start to an end, right? So you'd be learning about different types of algorithms, how do you code it in Python, and so on and so forth. We'll be starting that in a few weeks. And yeah, that's it. Any questions? I think just you, Akash, if you have any question.
No question as
Or
of
if it's something that you have you done any boot camps, or how are you trying to get into data science?
like I'm aware of the pipeline and the whole process which you explained right now. I have done my few of the projects and produce MLOps pipeline for from research development, research production, research to production level. So
Mhm.
I am aware of it.